Good evening, everyone. Recorded by Richter here, back with another artist highlight segment. Continuing along in my Detroit month, I have another hip-hop artist for you today, and that is rapper Jalen Frazier. But I would also be underselling Jalen if I called him just a rapper, because he can also sing and produce his own music, so he has a lot to offer the world. Now, Jalen is someone that I met last year. My story with him crosses paths through this dude, Pat313, who has his hand in Detroit music as well. We follow each other on social media, and I saw him post Jalen's song. I don't know if he does like some mentorship or whatever, but like he kind of helping Jalen along at the time. And so he posted one of Jalen's songs, and I was like immediately floored by it. I thought it was incredible. And so I started paying attention right then and there, and started talking to Jalen here and there on Instagram. And after our relationship develops a little bit, I get him to come do our Beats, Brews, and Points of View podcast back in 2024. It was actually pretty dope because at the time we were scouting different locations to record at, because we were trying to do some episodes in different venues around the city. And there was this place called Stat Garden that hosted us there, and that's where we had Jalen. And so after we cut the episode with Jalen, I've just kind of been following along with his career ever since, and he's got a new album out right now. It's actually right here. All Love Until It's Not. That's the brand new project out of Jalen Frazier and Circa 97, who is the producer of the project. But yeah, I thought this would be a good time to do it because I can discuss this album and all of the feelings that I have around it. So I guess I kind of want to start here. Well, actually, you know what? Let me take you through a little bit of Jalen's upbringing first before I get to this project. So Jalen grew up in the Detroit area and was influenced by music that his dad would play around the house, citing Stevie Wonder as one of his biggest influences. Now, this is something that I thought was really cool because that is also what my dad raised me on. Stevie Wonder music is what my parents were into big time. That was their favorite artist of all time. And I think it's interesting because Jalen is almost a decade younger than me. So for his parents to still be raising him off Stevie's music, to me speaks to the testament of influence Stevie Wonder has had over the years. And the funny part about it is I was born in '87, so that was already when Stevie's career was winding down as far as popular music goes. So, you know, a generation prior to me, take it back to '77, that's dead in the middle of the height of the best work out of Stevie Wonder. So this is like 3 generations and counting, you know, of people that have been raised by Stevie Wonder music. At least their parents have been playing it around the houses and everything. So I just thought that was a little cool thing, just to speaks to Stevie Wonder being the goat of all goats. But anyways, Jalen described the music as something that always helped him process his emotions and was something that was always there for him. He first started rapping. It wasn't something he considered as a career. It was just something that he was doing for fun. And he would record little things and send stuff to his friends, this and that. And he kind of got the ball rolling there in middle school and never looked back. He's worked with all kinds of different Detroit artists at this point. He has an album produced by Foulmouth, who Foulmouth, if you're unaware, just landed a production credit on Eminem's last project, which is crazy. He's also worked with D12's Bizarre, Beats and Brews alumni Isaac Castor. Man, Jalen and Isaac together, amazing. But yeah, he also can sing aside from the rapping, and he said his family was very into the Temptations when he was growing up, and Eddie Kendrick was always his favorite Temptation, and so he would always do the Eddie parts when his family would get together and do Temptation songs and everything, and I love that kind of stuff. Those are the kind of little tidbits to me that help me get to know an artist and learn about who they are. But anyways, let's get into this new project here, the one that I'm about to talk to you today, All Love Until It's Not. Now, for a little bit of a backstory, I was trying over the last couple of days to figure out how I was going to approach reviewing this. And the movie Sinners has kind of helped me connect the dots. Then I'll take you through why here. So Sinners, if you haven't seen it yet, is a new horror movie from Ryan Coogler starring Michael B. Jordan, and a lot of the plot is centered around what life was like for black folks in the South in the 1930s during Jim Crow. And it highly centers around the music of the time. So in Mississippi, blues music, the Mississippi Delta blues music was a big deal at that point. In the history books would tell you that blues music was a product of the Jim Crow South. And if you're unfamiliar with that, Jim Crow laws were put in place in 1865 in the South after the end of the Civil War. And basically what that was a set of rules that the South lived by for almost another 100 years, basically ramping up segregation and not affording black people nearly the life that white folks had. And so at this time in the early 30s, which the movie takes place in 1932, sharecropping was one of the main ways that black folks were able to earn money back in this time. And sharecropping was incredibly hard work. You had hot days out in the summer sun, and you're only renting the space that you're in. So a lot of your returns went back to whoever the farmer was that you were using to sharecrop on their land. So times were incredibly difficult for black folks in the South in this time. And so blues music came around as something to kind of, escape the pain in a sense. They would come up with blues songs during the workday and play them in juke joints in the nighttime. And so that is kind of what this movie is centered around. Obviously it goes into the world of horror and vampires and stuff too, but there's a history behind the plot of the movie as well. It's not just some stupid vampire movie. And so blues were basically, the reason why they were the blues and why they were sad songs is because they were dealing with all of this oppression, and so they were singing about it. And I say that to say that also in the movie, one of the main points that Ryan Coogler is also trying to get across with the horror aspect of it and the vampires is that music, when it's performed in a certain capacity, where the crowd and the performer and everything comes together in the perfect way, has the ability to open up the spirit world and bring together past, future, and present entities. And this is represented in the film with one of the most iconic scenes I've seen in a long time. It actually was so iconic to me that I saw the movie on Thursday night and could not stop thinking about it the next 2 days. So Saturday, this energy in me, I had to go see it again. So I walked my butt right across the road because I live by a movie theater, and I went and saw Sinners again just so I could experience this scene and hear it on those IMAX speakers again. And so I think what is cool about that, and why I wanted to relate that to Jalen's project, is that's kind of what it feels like when I'm listening to Jalen's project. It is rap music, it's hip hop, but it's also the blues. It's just told in a different time period. The 1930s saw Jim Crow laws, and that would go on all the way up until 1965. In the ending of slavery in 1865, they also put an amendment to the Constitution, which is the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, ratified in 1865, abolished slavery and involuntary servitude through the United States, except as a punishment for a crime. So this was basically the way that America worked around slavery. In 1965, when Jim Crow ended, black people were still not freed from slavery, because under the 13th Amendment, they would start locking black people up left and right. So even after Jim Crow ended, black folks were still getting treated horribly in this country, and so blues and other forms of blues music would go on forever, all the way up into hip hop that we know now. And that's why I brought it up, because it totally correlates with Jalen's project. Before I get there, And I'd also like to talk about the crack epidemic in the 80s. I'm reading this here, but it says, for the better part of a decade, a San Francisco Bay Area drug ring sold tons of cocaine to the Crips and Bloods street gangs of Los Angeles and funneled millions in drug profits to a Latin American guerrilla army run by the Central Intelligence Agency, a Mercury News investigation found. So basically, crack cocaine was introduced to black neighborhoods by our own government, and then they were not only decimated by crack as far as the addiction of it goes, they were also locked up in droves. So this continued slavery inside jail for well into the 80s and 90s, and still to this very day, because of the privatized prison systems in America. And what the privatized prison systems were basically about was the private prison industry in the United States emerged in the response to a country's high incarceration rates, which began to rise significantly in the 1980s due to policies related to war on drugs and strict sentencing laws. The first modern private prison, operated by Corrections Corporation of America, opened in Tennessee in 1984, marking the start of a growing trend that sought to alleviate overcrowding in public facilities. However, the industry is highly controversial, as critics contend that the profit motive can lead to detrimental outcomes, including the dehumanization of inmates and a financial interest in maintaining high incarceration rates, which is basically stating there's money in keeping people incarcerated. So that has been keeping the black community plagued for years and years, and in an economic and social disadvantage since the dawn of time. It now is apparent to us. So I wanted to say that because it plays right into the topic of this Jalen Frazier project. So Jalen Frazier, All Love Until It's Not, is kind of a manifesto detailing everyday street life and the turmoils that is involved in it. Opening sounds you hear on the title track, All Love Until It's Not, is heavy DJ scratches. And in this song, we get the topic of the album with the lyric, all love until it's not, I hammer home the messages. Basically, he is telling you what he's about to talk about, and he's going to tell you in detail the glamorous parts of what attracts young men to the street life, and also what is the detrimental parts of it that keeps you locked up or killed either way. This album starts off with kind of like a paranoid feeling almost, in a sense, and that's kind of reflected in the beat. It's kind of soft but menacing, and it just kind of feels like some rules and guidelines of the streets. A couple quotables here in this one is, don't trust your principles unless you're receptive to lessons. I think that's a really cool way of talking about someone who talks a lot but doesn't listen. And then another one I like in here is, bezel dancing every time it hits the light, enough to make a scholar grab a product and flip the white, which I think does a beautiful job of describing the imagery of the enticing lifestyle of drug dealing. You can get a lot of money and you can get nice things, but at what cost, basically, is what Jalen is trying to present here. And for every glamour that Jalen presents, he also, has a threat or a warning that's attached to it. And I think that that's really important to have that balance in there. And I also, something that I didn't realize until the end, I think each song on here, now Jalen, you're gonna have to tell me if I got this right or wrong. I think each song represents a day of the week. And I'll tell you why by the time I get to the end. There's 7 tracks, that's one thing. And each one of them seems to kind of be detailing, like the first one feels like it's the paranoia of picking up the work and then having to go about your day knowing that you could be robbed. So it kind of almost feels like that's the start of the work week, and he's picking up the work, and then he's gonna go through each day here. Track 2 is called Made Men, and this is really when I started to compare it to a modern day blues album. The sonics feel very blues influenced. It starts with a little sample from Snoop from The Wire, and I think all the skits and samples, little like talking parts on here are really well done. and then it kicks into this like soul sample that's very like they're in pain, and I get a cold feeling when I touch you is what the sample is saying, and it just has that real bluesy feel to the whole thing, and that alludes to the soulless nature of people who are completely lost and out of touch with humanity. And Jalen starts rapping about the trauma of street life and how people value money over human life, which causes him to constantly have to look over his shoulder and move cautiously. Talks about the importance on focusing on your dreams, his craft, and trying to change his scenery, make a better life for himself, escape the street life. And I think that there was some cool things in that one, and a cool quote that I put down for this track would be trying to find a couple ways to double blues faster. If you play with disrespect, they'll sing the blues after, which is alluding to what I was just talking about. They'll pretend to be one thing in your face, and then behind your back they could be plotting on you. And then we move along into the third track, which is Code of Ethics. This one kind of says it all in the title. Jalen is basically outlining the ethics of the streets that you live by in order to make it back to your family at night. And then moving on, you have Lead Sparks, which is track 4, which has a kind of a bit of an angry mafioso feel in the production. One of the cool quotes I put on that one is "Sundown, mask up, that's the language I'm spitting. You could lose your life lest you go make the decision." It kind of feels like Kill or Be Killed is like the overall Catch-22 message of that. From there you get to track 5, which is Cross-Examination, which I put a quote down for that one is "Gotta free your mind, physical's the only thing they can lock up. People dreaming about the love in the kitchen, watching it rock up." It's just really clever wordplay about all the subject matter I've been discussing. Then you get into track 6, which is Plight of Survival, and this one features a guest verse out of Rico Sama. And this one's cool because it's got a lot of flow switch ups. He goes in and out of regular speed to double and even triple time. And I think a cool quote on this one is, "I'ma carry Cartier frames into the afterlife." I think that's a good one because if you're a Detroiter, you kind of know what this is talking about. Like in Detroit, it's kind of like a sign that you made it to be able to get Cartier buffs. A lot of people get them. If you check out the Pistons ice cams, you see the Pistons going crazy in there with buffs. So I thought that was a kind of clever little funny one that made me laugh. And then finally we arrive at Hands Clean. And this is the first beat on the album that feels a little bit more subdued and peaceful. And I didn't necessarily understand why until I got towards the end. There is a quote on there that says, I do my math, I do my resting on the 7th day. And what he's alluding to there is how God, when he was creating the world, rested on the 7th day. And this is the 7th song on the project, which could allude to my theory that it's the 7th day, and each one of these is detailing a day in the life of the streets. And that's kind of what I gathered from this project out of Jalen. I think it's a super strong 7-track project. He's got tons of more stuff to come. The reason I wanted to make sure that I get on here and make this about him is because I really believe in him. I really think Jalen is super gifted, and I think that he's got what it takes to make some really meaningful art. So that's what I have for you today, and hopefully you could follow along with all my comparisons on why I thought it was kind of similar story-wise to the movie Sinners, the Ryan Coogler movie, which if you haven't seen that, I'm actually going to cut a whole video on that, so go see Sinners. It's incredible. I was so floored by how awesome of a job Ryan Coogler did. But anyways, that's what I got for you today. Detroit month. I'm also going to continue Detroit thing. So the Detroit month, I ran out of time, and April's coming to an end. But that's what I want to do with this channel anyways, is just try to elevate Detroit and Michigan voices. So I'm just going to keep going with the Detroit stuff and sprinkle in some of my other favorites along the way. But that's what I got, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.